All right. Hi, everybody. I am new to doing this, and so I do want to apologize. If any of this feels super awkward, it's because I don't film myself. But I did want to do today's lecture on distance, angles, and composition. And so today you will see me go back and forth between sitting here on the couch and being over on the side, interacting with my subject. My subject today is going to be a little tiny Winnie the Pooh bear that I had since preschool. So that makes it like 30 something years old. But yeah, so for this assignment, you will need an irregular shape, so it can't be flat, it can't be round, and it needs to be at least the size of your foot, but not bigger than you are in order to do this assignment, or at least to do this assignment and make it easier. So let's go ahead and start with distances. The first distance that we are going to cover is going to be a long shot, and that is where your subject is very far away from you, the photographer. It usually shows up to be about like a third in any one direction of your frame, so it seems further away. The next shot that we are going to talk about is a full shot, and that is going to encompass going from about here to there, filling up your whole screen, or filling up your whole screen from about here to there. You don't want it right up against the edges because that creates some visual tangency, which just makes the viewer feel really uncomfortable. So you want to stay away from the exact edges like this, because that's uncomfortable. So make sure you put it near the edges but not on the edges. The middle distance that we're going to talk about is a mid shot, which is almost what this is right now. This is the upper half of my body, which is usually what consists of a mid shot, but a mid shot can be just half of your subject in any direction. The next shot would be a close-up, and so if I got closer to the camera, this is just my head and shoulders, and I have like a little bit of space so I keep that visual tangency away. So that would be a close-up. I'll show you with the teddy bear as well. The last distance that we are going to be discussing is a macro shot. A macro shot is different than a micro shot, which is just looking up things very, very close. A macro shot makes those things that are small seem larger than life. Close-up picture was like a quarter of this subject's volume, whereas a macro is a detailed super up close, like you would be able to see all of the pores in my face type shot, or all the little flecks of color in my eyeball, things like that. So that would be a macro shot. All right, that brings us to angles, and angles are from the perspective of the photographer to the object. And so if you are taking an aerial shot, you will be looking straight down onto your subject. So sometimes they're referred to as bird's eye views, but usually it's because they are taken higher up, such as in the air. The next shot, if you are going down in your angles, would be a high angle, and a high angle technically is anything between a aerial shot and an eye level. So it's going to be above looking down onto whatever your subject happens to be. So the next one is eye level, where it's a straight across. Your camera isn't tilted down and it's not tilted up at all, and it's just straight across, like perpendicular. So your camera has no angle to it at all, and it's just straight across. So if your subject is not at eye level, you need to move your camera either up or down in order to put it at eye level. Eye level gets a little tricky with a lot of my students. They think it's their eye level, and so if they happen to be taking it of a flower on the ground, they'll stand up because that's where their eyes are when they stand up, and they will actually shoot it at a high angle and not an eye level. So you would have to be, as the photographer, to get eye level with your subject and shoot it that way. The next angle going down is a low angle. So you, the photographer, would be lower than whatever it is that you are taking a picture of. So if that means that you need to lie on the ground, then that means you need to lie on the ground. Lots of photographers get into odd positions in order to get the perfect shot. And I'm not saying that you have to lie on the ground all the time, but if you want a low angle, that is where low angles usually happen, or you could just move your camera down. Undershot is going to be shooting straight up, so that way you get the underneath of your subjects. So you would, sometimes it's referred to as a worm's eye view because worms are in the ground always looking up. I mean, they don't have eyeballs or anything like that, so you know, that's an issue. But if they could, that's where their view would be from, is straight underneath objects. So yeah, you don't need to pick up your objects and take pictures from underneath. You also aren't going to flip your objects upside down and shoot down on your objects because that's still an aerial just of the bottom side. So yeah, definitely take your camera and point it straight up. Composition is usually done by dividing your frame, which is the area in which you can see, into essentially tic-tac-toe. So that is 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines, and all of them in equal thirds. A vertical intention, so your subject would go from, like, not the literal, like, top edge here to the bottom literal edge, because that creates that visual tangency that we were talking about earlier, but almost to the top to almost to the bottom. That would be your vertical composition, and the vertical composition can take up 1/3 along one line. So hypothetically, you have your tic-tac-toe lines here, and so it would go along one of those lines, or it would take up about this much space in your image, which is 2/3 of the space. So either 1/3 of the space along one of those lines or 2/3 of the space within those lines. If you put it so that way your subject is only taking up 1/3 of the space in your image, then that means your subject is all the way over here, and this gets really uncomfortable. So you don't want to do that. You do want to take your subject and move them over onto that line. And I will show you in the pictures, but in case you're wondering why it's not all the way over, it's because it's visually uncomfortable. Next would be your horizontal composition, and that is where it would go all the way across, like your horizon line. So you can either do it again on 1/3 on the top lines, because your lines would be here, and you would either do it on the top 1/3 or on the bottom 1/3, or it would take up the top 1/3 space or the bottom 1/3 space. And again, you'll see the examples. After that is going to be the intersection. And so if you have these lines and these lines making up your grid, then wherever they cross is going to be an intersection. So you would have 4 intersections approximately in those spots. I didn't do this one very correctly. So this one, that one, next up would be diagonal or opposite intersections. And so you could either have a diagonal line going this way, or a diagonal line going this way, or opposite intersections here, or opposite intersections there. Even though these are opposites, they're not opposite corners, like from their intersections. They're just on the same side, which would make this a separated vertical composition, which is just weird. Lastly would bring us to the center focus. And center focus is my students' hardest composition to master. A lot of students think, oh, well, I'll just put it in the middle. Like I'm kind of sitting in the middle now. This right now is a terrible composition. It just happens to have the best light in my house, and I don't have any lights. Like, honestly, there's like no portable lights in my house, which is terrible. Yeah, so that, I know this is a terrible composition. I'm gonna work on that, but I mean, I guess I could have done a better job by like sitting more in the middle of this like picture frame orientation I got going on. Yeah, I should have done it, but it's too late now. Things to do for next time, I guess. So you will need to put your subject definitely in the middle, but the thing that makes it center focus is that all of the implied lines and objects in your picture are going to also be pointing towards the middle, which is what causes it to be focused on the center. If it's just something in the middle, then it's ugly. And that is why a lot of people's photographs aren't good. And when you look at a professional's photograph versus your photograph of the same thing, you're like, why is theirs so much better? It's going to be a better composition. So center focus is the hardest for my students to master. So I don't want you to be discouraged. I do want you to keep trying until you get it. So I hope that this is helpful. Also, I don't know if this is foolishness or genius, but to try to get my students more engaged during distance learning or virtual school or whatever term they happen to be throwing around that particular moment, for the terrible situation of what it is, because learning outside of the classroom as a teacher feels horrible. And so I want my students to be more engaged, and it's difficult to do that, but I know that in the classroom, when I'm there, my students will ask me questions and have me tell stories in order to get to know me, so that way they feel more closely related to me, and they feel more comfortable sharing their artwork, and they feel more comfortable asking me questions. And so because we're not in the classroom able to do that, I have decided to share embarrassing stories or other stories upon request, which is terrible all at the same time because I'm putting this on the internet. But at the end of all the videos, that's what's going to happen. So if you're still watching this, I do want to encourage you to leave, because there's no more photography information. But if you want to hear an embarrassing story about myself, then I guess keep watching until the end, because that's what this is. I've decided to go with like a classic embarrassing story that I know we all have, and I would love to hear some embarrassing stories from you guys so I don't feel quite so foolish. I know some of my friends are watching these just so they can listen to these embarrassing stories. It is what it is. So everybody has a pee your pants story, and my most embarrassing pee your pants story was when I was in 3rd grade, and it was during like the PE time that we had one random day, and we were in like the multi-purpose room, I guess, and the PE that we were doing was beanbags, and so we were supposed to throw beanbags into like various like goal-oriented places, and so we were throwing beanbags, and at some point one of the kids decided that they were going to go back and get the beanbags, and it was fine because we had all run out. But then the kid starts throwing the beanbags back towards us, not at us, but like towards us, and one of the kids in my group decided, oh, you know what we should do? We should pelt this kid back there with the beanbags he keeps giving us. And I thought it was hilarious. I laughed so hard that obviously this is a pee your pants story. I started to pee my pants, and then I panicked and ran outside the door and just stood there peeing my pants outside. And because I didn't know how to fix it, like, the bathroom wasn't close enough for me to make it, like, it had already started, but I didn't want to, like, do it in the room in front of everybody else. And so my friends didn't know what happened. Like, nobody knew. They just thought I left. Like, I just dipped out for a minute, and I'm standing outside, and I guess PE ended because I was just out there for a real long time, or at least it felt like forever. And all the kids, like, get dismissed to go back to class, and then the teacher's like, where's Amy? And the other kids are like, I don't know, she ran outside, because 3rd graders aren't worried about like danger and stuff like that. So they were just like, she's fine, people go outside, it's not dangerous. Plus, it was the 80s. Yeah, it was still the 80s. No, maybe it was 91. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But yeah, so like I'm outside and the teacher like looks at me, and I'm wearing, because it's like late 80s, early 90s, I'm wearing this white overall short like thing. I don't know. I thought it was cute. Obviously had terrible taste. That lasted for far too long. But it was white, and it was shorts, and it was overalls, and it had blue polka dots all over it. It's terrible. I don't remember what shirt went with it. And, I was also wearing, like, double socks, which also had pee all over them. And so, like, it was white, and it had this big, like, yellow stain on it because I peed my pants, and I'm out there. And luckily, that teacher just, like, took pity on me and, like, dismissed the class, told me to wait there, and then, like, sent me to the office. And my dad picked me up, and I went home, and I took a shower, and changed my clothes, and then I went back to school. And like, it was lame peeing my pants, but luckily nobody knew. But I walked into class with my 3rd grade teacher explaining to the whole class that I had peed my pants and had to go home. Which is completely unnecessary information for everyone. It could have just been Amy had an emergency and she had to go home, and that would be it. Like, I might not come back, or I might come back, but like, the teacher didn't need to tell everybody that I peed my pants. And that was the moment I walked in, and it was horrifying, because then everybody was just like, oh, she did change her clothes. Look at her. She's in 3rd grade and she peed her pants. And I'm like, oh, I can't with you. Like, it's still embarrassing. I'm 38 and I can't get over it. Like, that moment when I just peed my pants as a 3rd grader. It's terrible. Luckily, there was a kid in class who pooped himself every day, so, like, my reputation as a kid who peed themselves didn't last very long. I think that was my only saving grace, is that there's a kid who pooped himself every day. So, yeah. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this embarrassing story. It's terrible, and I don't know why I volunteered to do this. I'm hoping for more engagement. So, yeah, I wish you all the best, and I look forward to seeing beautiful images from you. And if they're not beautiful now, they will get there eventually. So I'll talk to you guys later.